Hi, everyone. I'm Andrew, and I've been part of the Cedar Ridge community for not quite 4.5 years now. I'm a broadcast journalist, a former part time associate pastor, and a recent theology grad currently pondering the next step. It's my honor to be able to speak with you for a little while today for this installment of God in the Movies. The film to which I was drawn for today is kind of an oldie at this point. Came out in 1993 when some of us weren't even born yet. Groundhog Day is widely regarded as a modern classic, spawned countless writings, both casual and scholarly. The film touches on some very weighty concepts, borrowed from Greek mythology, existential philosophy, even theology, including Buddhism, Hinduism, Catholicism. The central theme is of a man who, with no explanation given, becomes somehow trapped in a loop in which he goes to bed one day and then wakes up, and it's the morning of the same day, and the same day repeats over and over and over again. We're going to show a short clip of Bill Murray's character, Phil Connors, Pittsburgh TV weather forecaster who drove the previous night to Punxsutawney, PA, with his producer and camera operator to cover the Groundhog Day ceremonies. Phil works local, but he thinks he's a big shot and deserves to be at the network. He refers to himself as the talent and a major celebrity. Behind his back, Larry the camera guy calls him a prima donna. We join Phil as he wakes up in his room at the bed and breakfast Groundhog Day morning. Only it's the third time he's waking up here, and everything's the same. Same people, in the same places, doing the same things at the same time. And he's freaking out. Let's check out the clip. The clock, the song on the radio, the guy at the top of the stairs, the old man who is homeless, the insurance salesman, all the same. Phil is stuck. The movie never says how long this ultimately goes on for Phil. Some have theorized years, decades, even centuries. At one point, Phil starts asking some pretty big questions. We're going to show another clip, and as we do, let's pay special attention to the questions Phil asked, especially the one at the start of this clip. He's sitting in a bowling alley with two other guys, and they've all had a little too much, okay, way too much, beer. Let's take a look. What would you do if you were stuck in one place and every day was exactly the same and nothing that you did mattered? What a question. Throughout periods of our lives, certainly in periods of mine, I have felt just like the other guy in the bowling alley who said, well, that about sums it up for me. During the past year plus of COVID, many of us may have felt that way more commonly and more deeply. There's really a deep sadness and a danger in thinking that what we do doesn't matter. We might start thinking like Phil, that a life without meaning is a life without consequence, or at least any kind of consequence we would have to really worry about. I don't know if you picked up on it in the scene, but we don't know if the police car pursuing Phil and his buddies on the railroad tracks ever safely made it off the tracks. In subsequent scenes, we see Phil fully embracing this idea of no consequences, and it gets really disturbing in a hurry. He's shown robbing an armored car. We see him at one point manipulating one young woman in the town to trick her into a one-night stand. His primary pursuit is his own entertainment, with a lack of regard for consequences on himself or others. Because this movie is a PG-rated sort of comedy, it doesn't fully explore just how far that kind of mindset could potentially take a person. If you don't think your life matters, will you begin thinking that other people's lives don't matter either? This movie seems to suggest that it's important to find meaning. The struggle to find meaning is universal across cultures and times. And one way we know that is that many people through the ages have written about it. People such as the author of Ecclesiastes, a book of poetry in the Jewish scriptures, into which many Christians refer as the Old Testament. And in some places, that book comes across as very gloomy. Frankly, I'm really glad we have Ecclesiastes. I'm encouraged by the fact that fellow followers of God did not have their acts perfectly put together either. They faced a lot of what I face. My struggle was theirs too. Let's look at the start of the first chapter in Ecclesiastes. The words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. And this book is actually attributed to Solomon, who was rich and wise and had access to all the creature comforts of his day that he could ask for. And still we read this: meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. What do people gain from all their labors, at which they toil under the sun? Generations come, generations go, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets and hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north. Round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place the streams come from, there they return again. All things are wearisome, more than one can say. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. What would you do if you were stuck in one place and every day was exactly the same and nothing that you did mattered? Would your perspective change if you fully realized that what you do does matter? In the next scene we're going to look at, Phil turns his attention to his producer, Rita. He hatches a plan to win her heart. And this major celebrity prima donna, who at one point referred to everyone living in Punxsutawney as Hicks, tries to win her heart by doing what everyone with a Facebook or Instagram account is at least tempted to do: present a less than genuine version of himself. Check it out. You'll never love anyone but yourself. That's not true. I don't even like myself. In later scenes, we are shown in rapid fire Rita slapping Phil's face over and over at the ends of different days, actually the same day, and what apparently are multiple failed attempts to convince her to love him. So why does Phil fail? Well, you can't force people to love you, right? You can trick people with insincerity for a while, perhaps, but you shouldn't expect someone to genuinely love you if the you that you show is not the real you. We get some insight here into why Phil has decided to be a phony. He doesn't love, doesn't even like himself. Underneath his public self-admiration appears to be something of a self-loathing. And if he doesn't love who he really is, how can he think anyone else would? In his writings, the great Christian thinker Henry Nouwen often approached what is called the Great Commandment, which is to love our neighbor as ourselves, as twofold, meaning that we should not just assume that all of us already love ourselves, and so then we go out and love our neighbors the same way. Many of us, and perhaps at various times, all of us, may not love ourselves. Nouwen linked together the two ideas of loving our neighbors and loving ourselves, suggesting that each one is necessary for the other. In The Inner Voice of Love, he wrote this: one of the greatest dangers in the spiritual life is self-rejection. When we say, if people really knew me, they wouldn't love me, we choose the road toward darkness. In the next clip, we see Phil Connors start heading down a dark road. Take a look. The scenes after what you just saw get seriously darker. And again, like earlier, the rating and genre of this movie don't allow the fullest exploration into the depth of that darkness. Phil embarks on several attempts to end his own life, and he fails at that too. With each attempt, he grows more frustrated. But then Phil advances an interesting idea that he, in fact, is God, or at least a God, because he is apparently immortal, can't be destroyed. But more interestingly, at least to me, Phil suggests that he's a God because by now he knows everything going on in Punxsutawney. He's been around so long that he knows everybody's names, what they do for a living, their hopes and dreams. He has complete knowledge. Do those things make someone a god? great power, thrown in jail one night, free the next morning, dead one day, alive again the next morning? Does being all-knowing make one a god? And if so, does having some knowledge make a person at least godly? Most of us would probably say that Phil Connors isn't a god. Then what is? What makes God God? If knowledge, especially theological knowledge, is a godly attribute, and many of us might say that it is, it obviously isn't all there is. There's something more. Paul wrote this to the Corinthians in the middle of addressing the issue of whether it's okay to eat food that's been offered to idols, and he drops a massive truth bomb. We know that we all possess knowledge, Paul writes, but knowledge puffs up while love builds up. Knowledge, even doctrinal theological knowledge, can puff up. The God we come together to worship and from whom we learn is the God of love. We dare to embrace this idea, or try to, because it's so big it can be very hard to embrace, that not only is love the paramount attribute of God, but that God is love. One more cut from this movie, and at this point, Phil is starting to learn from his journey. He seems to understand that although he has knowledge, it only puffed him up. And maybe he caught the subtle subtext that knowledge is not necessarily the same thing as knowing. Rita told him, "You don't even know me." Phil begins a turnaround. It starts when, for the first time, he brings hot coffee to his cold colleagues at the Groundhog festivities. Small, but significant first step. He then starts reading every day. He learns over the course of some considerable time to play the piano. He learns to make ice sculptures. It gets a little ridiculous even, but it drives home the point that he's making an investment in himself. He's working on himself. He's begun to actually like, maybe even love himself. And we see him beginning to genuinely love his neighbor. Phil walks by the man who is homeless, the same man he has walked by hundreds, maybe thousands of times before. But this time, something different happens. Let's see. A powerful moment for me is the one in which Phil tries again to save the old man's life. We don't know how many times he's tried before, and he just can't save him. And he looks up to the sky in surrender. No, Phil, you are not God, but you love your neighbor, and that's huge. Following this scene, Phil uses his knowledge of the town and his love for his neighbors. Love and knowledge together are a good thing. He darts out and he catches a little boy just as he's falling from a tree. He changes a tire with the people still in the car just moments after it went flat. He walks into a restaurant just as a man starts choking and performs the Heimlich, saves his life. The scenes keep going with an alarming number of great things Phil does, and again, it gets a little ridiculous. But perhaps not so much if we understand that this single day repeating is a microcosm of the days you and I live. Every day, of course, filled with multiple examples of mundaneness, same old things. But also, and we might miss this if we think that nothing we do matters, every day is filled with possibility, a chance to make an investment in ourselves, a chance to love our neighbors, and therefore a chance to get to know God. We find this in chapter 4, verses 7 and 8, in the first epistle of John. Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. And everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God, here it is, God is love. Let's take our final moment together to pray. There is a prayer known as the prayer of examen, Examen. It dates back to Ignatius Loyola. I'm drawn to it today because it's a prayer designed to be prayed each day among the drudgeries, challenges, and opportunities of each day to help us refocus and reconnect us to God. So let's begin. Let's start by preparing ourselves, by closing our eyes and quieting ourselves for a moment. Breathe in a deep breath. Let it out. Breathe in again. And back out. As we let ourselves breathe slowly, let's think back over the past day, yesterday and into today. And let's find some things we're grateful for. They can be anything: time with family, getting all the laundry done, an encouraging email from a friend. Let's take a moment to identify some things over the past day for which we have gratitude. And let's take a moment to thank God. Now let's think over the past day and identify moments when we were feeling something in our hearts. Moments in which you felt joy or frustration, boredom, anger, compassion, or some other sensation. No detail is too mundane. Think on moments when you were feeling something. Take a moment. In those moments when we feel positive or negative, there is an invitation to grow in faith and love and to respond with action. At those moments, how did we respond to those invitations over the past day? Did we meet the moment? Did we fall short? Let yourself really feel it right now. If you're thinking of a moment over the past day, maybe you wish you could do over. It is so much healthier than to bury it. And let's ask God right now to guide us into how we can respond to it. The rest of today and tomorrow will be different in some ways, and it will be very much the same in others. Let's take a moment now to thank God for the possibilities that lie ahead and ask God's Spirit to bring sensitivity to our hearts to act in kindness and justice and love. Amen.